Grr. Raw.
Hello, lovelies. Let's see. Housekeeping stuff first. I know progress on everything has been slow recently, and I know I've got stuff promised to people. Hi, OGGM. But yeah, not been well. I haven't been looking after people, and I have this one project that I have to get done first before I can really do much of anything else. But the good news is I finished the introduction, and the rest of the book should be a lot easier than the rest. So yeah, I'm also handing out access to my IP and game systems like candy at the moment. So if you have a project and you're willing to give me a small cut of the proceeds and you want to use anything of mine, then you get in touch and we'll figure that out. Biggest amongst those things obviously is the kind of soft relaunch of Machinations. There have been setbacks, some of which are related to geopolitics and macroeconomics, some of which are down to personal relationship issues and so on. So we're scaling back the main thrust of the Machinations relaunch to be something more like a zine. I did talk about this in a dedicated video this week, but if you feel like writing short adventures, sort of short adventures or long adventure seeds would be the way to think about it, or short articles based around Machinations of the Space Princess, do get in touch, grim@post-mort.com, and I will put you in touch with the project manager and we'll see how things go there. We will be paying money. Not much necessarily to start with, but there will be a crowdfunder for the zine after we've done like a proof of concept to show that it can be done, and so on. So this is an opportunity to get in on the ground floor, and if the crowdfunding is successful, there will be more money, obviously, for writers and artists. So we would like to involve as many people as possible so that they can help promote it, and so that we can have a broad sweep of different concepts and ideas. So there's that. My new medication regimen has greatly lessened the pain I've had in my feet and legs, which has been restricting my mobility and causing me to be a bit of a chubster, but seems to have increased the pain in my back, which may be kidney swelling or something else. So just be aware I can't necessarily spend as much time as I have in the past sat at the computer, because it puts strain on my back, and yeah, the pain there has been actually pretty fucking agonizing, to be honest. Bit better today, so that's good. There should be Tabletopless tonight, unless I have another massive flare-up. It just, this year seems to be cursed for Tabletopless. Various members of the team have been having horrible health stuff happen, illness, lurgy, flare-ups, you name it. It's been a very difficult year so far. So hopefully we can stay on course for tonight. You can find all the links for Tabletopless at criticalhole.com. Then on Sunday I'll be running Fabula Ultima again, which means I should probably remind myself what we were doing last time. Yeah, alright, on to the comments. On the Atomfall review, Sideway says, it's giving me Stalker vibes instead of Fallout. I know I'm going to get shit for this, but I never played Stalker. I'm a fan of Roadside Picnic, the book and the film to an extent, and I always felt like Stalker was kind of a watered down version of that, and so I didn't really want to play it because even though it feels like my sort of thing, I would rather have my vision of Roadside Picnic unalloyed with other ideas from games and so on. So yeah, that's why I've kept clear of that. So I can't really comment on the comparison there, but I'll take your word for it. Constantinu Pianist says, which almost sounds like Constant Penis, which is fun. Anyway, he says, the intro music is sick. Is it Ligeti? Or Ligeti? So, Konstantin, the intro music I used on that video was the introduction to the 1981 Day of the Triffids series. I think it may have been BBC. But the music for that series was made by Christopher Gunning, who did a whole bunch of similar work in other places. But yeah, it's a proper eerie sort of choral thing going on there. Interestingly, old series, particularly old BBC series, they don't seem to be that worried if you use the theme music from a 70s or 80s TV show in your videos on YouTube. So there you go. There's a quick tip for everybody. Paul Berry says, please review more computer RPGs. So this isn't a computer game channel. I do occasionally make exceptions. Atomfall intersected with my comics interest because of the Rebellion connection, my love for old British sci-fi, particularly Quatermass and so on, and some various other things, Rebellion getting into the RPG business seemingly in the relatively near future and so on. A lot of games don't do that, and also I don't like to review computer games until I've at least played most of the way through them, by which point any review that I'll be doing is pretty stale, to be honest. And because it's not what the channel is about, it doesn't get a huge amount of views usually when I do it, despite the broader mass appeal of doing so. That said, I've nearly finished playing the newest Dragon Age, which isn't as bad as people were making out, though the whole gender non-binary thing does clang like a horseshoe into a bowl of tomato soup, but it's not as bad as people said. It's a perfectly cromulent game, so maybe I'll talk about that, because that intersects with tabletop RPGs as well to an extent, as well as various social issues and things that interest me. So I might talk about Dragon Age. On the video about Theatre of the Mind, Redacted says, good video. One of my players has aphantasia and another is AudHD. So while I prefer Theatre of the Mind, it's not applicable all the time and requires its own hurdles to ensure that everyone is having fun. I spend a good deal of time finding or creating images and maps, if nothing else than as a reference to help people associate and relate to what is being described. Do I spend more time explaining things and preparing props? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes. So I am a very improvisational GM anyway. I don't like putting a great deal of time into prep because it tends to weight the way in which I let the game unfold. Interestingly, tying into elsewhere, one thing that AI, art and so on does allow for is very quickly creating something of reference for a home game. I mean, it's not going to be good enough to use in a product or anything, but providing visual references and so on for people, it's something that, like having an AI sidekick while you're GMing is quite useful for. But yeah, I'm a low prep improvisational GM, and therefore I prefer Theatre of the Mind because it lets me be more freewheeling. Leakite says, I have full aphantasia, but I've always played and run TTRPGs using Theatre of the Mind. It feels no different to me than reading a book. Yeah, but other people read a book and they picture the characters and the environment and so on in their mind's eye. They see it the same well, not quite the same way, but a similar way to the way in which, you look around yourself and you see things, rather than matrix code. So I wouldn't expect your experience of reading a book to be different to your experience with a role-playing game in that way. But yeah, that's what makes it tricky for people to truly understand what's going on with you and how you can play and enjoy to the same extent. It's like I don't really have an internal monologue like some people do. Like, I don't think, I'm going to have a drink. My brain doesn't work like that. So that's something that's different to some people. That's another thing that individuates us. Monkey Delicious says, I personally never participate in theatre of the mind without a guaranteed intermission of the mind. I'm old enough to remember intermissions in the cinema as well. I remember seeing Lynch's Dune, and there was an intermission in the middle, and you get your chalk ice and your drink in those weird little cups where you pierce the lid with the straw. Yeah. Things that don't exist anymore. But yeah, our intermission is usually when the food arrives. Gary Snow Creative says, this is the first time I'd ever considered that somebody couldn't envision what a GM is saying. I would have thought that the hobby's default mode of theatre of the mind would have scared them away from ever playing in the first place. It's almost like choosing to hike when you don't like the outdoors. But as many people have commented, a surprisingly large number of people have commented, like they are aphantasic, or someone in their group suffers from aphantasia. Suffers is a judgmental term, but you know what I mean. So clearly there's a lot of people out there, and it's weird. It feels weird, but there are a lot of them. It's interesting. Edward says, aphantasic here. I always thought that the mind's eye was a literary term, hence why I often ask for a setting awareness reset. I've argued against grids, I prefer hexes and minis since the 90s when they began to show up at conventions regularly. For people who've never played a TTRPG before, it's easier to teach using theatre of the mind. True, but there is also something to be said there for minis and maps and things, because that can draw people in. They can see that you're doing something that involves a game, right? Because most people come with a board game mindset and then wonder what you're doing. Whereas if you're just referencing books and apparently just shooting the shit with each other, it could be hard for them to grok that you're playing a game. Games Workshop always puts nicely painted minis in the window to attract people in and interest them. So there's something to be said for that. And at conventions, there are often massively elaborate game boards, or for war games, massively elaborate battlefields and so on, to really kind of show off what the game can be when you put all of these things together. So I think it's both ways. Theatre of the Mind is accessible and cheap, but visual aids certainly attract people's attention. When I was talking about the Adolescence series, Morgan Lewis says, I had to fight back against an automatic sense of defensiveness while listening to you initially. I watched Adolescence, and while its contents weren't anything new to me necessarily, I touted its value to others because it was, in my mind, shedding light on relevant dangers faced by boys, lack of support, toxic expectations of masculinity, radicalization, and the role of technology in the above, in an approachable way to a larger audience. However, there's a lot of value to what you're saying and your criticisms, and I'm grateful I took the time to listen further rather than relying on that knee-jerk reaction. I'm grateful too for your putting yourself out there on what must be an unpopular stance. Well, yeah, and exposing my own weaknesses and foibles as a way to try and build sympathy and empathy for others. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people do just go on that knee-jerk reaction, but I do think it is still worth talking about difficult things for the occasions when someone does look a little bit further, does listen a little bit deeper, and doesn't immediately recoil. Unfortunately, I don't think Adolescence is going to improve anything, and from what I've seen already, it just seems to be justifying people's crackdowns and censorship and further demonization of men and boys, which is unfortunate. On the video about Trump cornholing analog gaming, Gigantosaur says, if increasing the price of cheap Chinese luxury products created with slave labor is the cost of rebuilding the American middle class, then cheap Chinese luxury products be damned. Alright, but there's not going to be any rebuilding of the American middle class here. And there's the rub, I guess. And a lot of these cheap Chinese products aren't actually made in China anymore. They're made in places like Vietnam and other places in Southeast Asia. So yeah, the Chinese are outsourcing now a lot of stuff. Yeah, there is a problem with slave labor, but the other big problem here is, I mean, any slave labor is a problem, but then, you know, the US uses its prison population to do slave labor. So, swings and roundabouts, really. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But the point is, nobody else can make a lot of these things. Right? China and Southeast Asia is tooled up with the factories to make this stuff. And if you don't get it made there, then you can't make it anywhere else. You know, that's the situation that we're in. And these tariffs and so on have no accompanying policy whatsoever to onshore labour and industry. They're just kind of making it really hard to buy anything from anywhere, but without spending any money, time or effort encouraging America to retool, to reindustrialize. And even if it did, that wouldn't be the middle class. You know, you've got people in the service economies who can barely make it by, and you really think someone on a conveyor belt adding stickers to a product is gonna be middle class? Nah, man, that ain't gonna happen. If there even is anybody, and it isn't just robots. So, I mean, this is a weak source justification. Like, I don't think you actually have that moral outrage. I think that's an excuse. I think that's a post hoc rationalization to try and make sense of a policy that makes no sense and doesn't have the necessary commensurate investment in industry. Plus, you know, all these tariffs are going to make setting up that industry incredibly difficult because raw materials and the machines to make the stuff have to come from elsewhere as well. So, on my now quite old review of Vampire 5th Edition, Cognitive Resonance says, the difference in rulebook cover art sums up everything you said. It started as tasteful, subtle and gothic, then suddenly 5th edition was splattered with unicorn vomit and overcharged with the most insufferable of political demands. I mean, to an extent, yeah, but it isn't the 90s anymore. So I think there would need to be some sort of update, but I don't think this is it. It didn't seem to tap into any horror zeitgeist or anything, and you know, we kind of missed all the True Blood and everything else. We kind of skipped over all of that, and horror today is in a very weird position and isn't really much related to vampires or traditional monsters. It's mostly seems to be torture porn and vague sort of allusions to ghosts and demons and things. So I don't know what a zeitgeist grabbing horror game at the moment would be. Maybe a band of killer clowns. Who knows? On the Machinations project video, the Angry Piper says, I just bought this last week from Lulu. Looking forward to diving in, but I gotta be honest, writing for you would be intimidating. Nah, man. Firstly, you wouldn't be writing for me, you'd be writing for the project manager. and secondly, I'm possibly too chill as a boss. So, because I don't harass people enough to get stuff done. Many people owe me things, so I feel a bit less bad about me owing other people things. On the homelessness video, Lysander says, I've technically been homeless on and off for a few years. Mostly it covered the time from when I returned from living abroad and was living with my family. Sure, on paper I had a home. On paper, according to the government and my bank, I have lived with my grandparents for most of the last decade. However, due to work, I was also living at my sister's house, sleeping in her front room on a futon, with all my belongings perpetually held in stack boxes. I could never declare it as such, because the second I did, her landlord would demand an extra few £100 a month in rent. Death to landlords. I've also worked in an acute mental health ward, and a not insignificant number of patients were just homeless people who had mental health needs because of their homelessness. I still see one former patient on my commute to work, and I believe they went right back into being homeless. So, yeah, because we don't have joined up thinking. The Home First initiative from Finland does seem to be hugely effective. Jeff from Denkar says, there are some issues I do not think you considered. You're leaving out a lot of issues that affect homelessness in places like the US and Canada, for that matter. The drug issue is a primary one. Well, I didn't leave that out. The Finnish model directly talks about that. Many homeless shelters offer opportunities to get off the street and get a roof over their heads, but many of the homeless refuse because it means no more drugs, which is why you need a joined-up policy. Plus, in cases where it's been tried, free housing, in many cases the properties were damaged by those very same homeless they were trying to help. Who has to pay for that? No solution is perfect, but overall it's still going to be cheaper, and we do as society, because it's for the good of all of us, and ends up saving us money if you want to be fiscally conservative about it. Or the electricity or water or heating for that matter, same answer. Or maintain them for that matter, same answer. And that doesn't even count the high rate of mental illness amongst the homeless either, right? Which, as we just covered, the previous commenter, is lessened and helped to be dealt with by the fact that someone has a roof over their head, and because in the Finnish model they are right there on site, like, people to help them with their mental health issues. A lack of long-term psych facilities where they could get help is another major issue. Blame Reagan. Before they could even live on their own, they would need to be in a better place mentally so they could handle the responsibility. That's not what the Finnish model suggests. Rather that having some safety, stability and security massively helps their mental health and provides opportunities for them to recover. Something that can't happen without such facilities. If they can't take care of themselves, then what good is putting them in a house they cannot maintain or keep in good living condition? Because it helps them, and as a byproduct helps the rest of us, because it's cheaper than dealing with all their medical emergencies or police issues, things like that. It's a step to helping them care for themselves. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and for all the good intentions involved, just throwing housing at them is not going to help without dealing with several issues that often lead them into homelessness beforehand. Except that it does, and we know that from the Finnish model and others. There is this weird thing that I find a lot of Americans get into. Right, we are used to this idea of American exceptionalism, that Americans think that they're the best at everything, that there is no better way than the way things are done in America. It's very parochial, very short-sighted, and when they are presented with the way things are done elsewhere, whether it be socialized healthcare or dealing with homelessness or any other of the big sort of social issues that we have, you have the opposite of American exceptionalism. You have this American unexceptionalism, where people seem to think that America is uniquely bad, and that's why none of this stuff that works sometimes everywhere else, like when it comes to healthcare, that this stuff will not work in America because America is uniquely awful. Americans are uniquely selfish. Americans are uniquely criminal in that they will exploit any system that's set up. It's weird. How can you, at the same time, think America's the best country on earth with the most opportunities and so on, in the absolute teeth of the evidence, and then on the other side think America is so useless, so corrupt, that Americans are so immoral, amoral, all the rest of it, that things that work everywhere else that they have been tried would not work in America. It's just bizarre. Like, we're number one, except, you know, we can't get a handle on this healthcare thing that every other developed nation does. So we're just going to kind of sit here and let people die unnecessarily and go bankrupt and shit, you know, because we're just not that good. But we're still number one. It makes no sense to me. It's a paradox. It's incompatible. On Burning Wheel, the review I did ages ago, well, this guy goes on a long tirade. What does he say? Repeatedly calling this needlessly complicated and nitpicky and open to interpretation. Tells me you didn't understand the thrust of the game in the slightest. It's okay to prefer simple games. Bitch, I've played Rollmaster. It's okay to like traditional games, as you call them. Play those. We like what we like. No shame in that. But if Mouse Guard was impenetrable to you, I don't know what to say. And your statement that character burning was fun as a mini-game, but probably requires a whole session in itself, is wild to me. Of course character burning takes a whole session. The character burner with its life pass is one of the most brilliant aspects of the whole system. We just passed the 1-year anniversary on our current campaign. 41 sessions, and our characters are all coming into their own. Burning Wheel rewards committed players who like to dive deep into mechanics. If you want to play casually and kill everything that moves and be the best at everything you want to do, play something else. There are good games for those kind of plays. Burning Wheel is a brutal game with consequences, and you're right, it's prep heavy, and obviously it doesn't appeal to you, but I fail to understand why you don't understand why this was an indie darling. Look, I didn't like it, but what really clinches it is that the fans of Burning Wheel are all insufferable cunts. Arrogant, insufferable cunts. On my 5th edition SRD audiobook, Natalie Pizza Rogila, I think, says, I don't have any impediment, but I'm a mom of 2, I have a job, and I like to draw and do other hobbies. And for sure, games master different games. So this came in quite handy for listening to. Meanwhile, I could cook, clean up, go swimming, or craft minis. So, which makes me think, right, so the SRD of the 20 and 24 edition is either out or is about to be out. And I asked myself, is it worth me doing the very long-winded and throat-killing process of recording that SRD as well? So, the 5th edition SRD audiobook, I offered a sold version where you could just buy it and download all the audio files, and because turning into an audiobook I judged to be transformative, plus I included a bit of commentary and so on. And then here on YouTube, like, the introduction to the playlist of the 5th edition SRD audiobook has like 24,000 hits, which isn't a lot by a lot of people's standards, but it's a lot by my standards, right? I think only my He-Man Lore Bible video or the Kalergi plan have anything like similar or higher view counts. So is it worth me committing the 2024 edition to an audiobook as well? Because I don't know that it has the same sort of traction. I don't know that it's that worth it to anybody. And it's a lot of work, but it is something that would be tempting to do just because it helps. Previously, you know, the 5th edition SRD really helped the channel kind of tick along and earn a little bit of money in the background. over the years. So I don't know. I don't know if I should do it or not. If you've made it this far into the video, leave a comment. On AI and being a crip, Zerarian says, as a person who suffers from very severe depression and may have other neurodivergences underneath, haven't gotten tested, I know depression isn't considered divergence by most people. Yeah, but it is though. Who's also more or less incapable of physical labour due to 2 spinal injuries and a faulty heart. AI is a very useful tool to have in the arsenal, even if it's just to occasionally generate a picture that will never get used outside of a home game scene as an object of personal inspiration, or to use it to fix something like rhyme structure if you, like me, aren't a native English speaker. It also helps since I'm aphantasic, since it's nice to just have a sort of approximately like that reference I can link off a scene or character to people at the table. As someone who's working on a TTRPG product with a friend of mine, with hopes of potentially publishing it someday, I can acknowledge that using AI, at least for art, will basically blacklist the product to a vast group of potential players due to the outrage against it. I've seen some published work with AI art in it, and it kind of sticks out in a way that doesn't look great art-wise. I definitely don't have the money to pay artists for multiple pieces of art for the book, if it materialises, and public domain isn't exactly full of decent quality Shansha art, but we'll see once we get there. So yeah, I mean, that's part of what the video was about, was that I think in this whole argument around AI, people aren't considering, even some people who have certain disabilities, aren't considering how it can help compensate, particularly for neurodiverse people. I think it has huge potential. There are ethical and unethical uses of AI, just as there are ethical and unethical uses of guns, or whatever else you care to mention. We are currently in the process of finding our way through all of this, and eventually it will settle into something. There will be some level of acceptability, some level of unacceptability, but everyone seems to be just rushing to an extreme point of view on this. And like almost everything, it's a lot more nuanced than people give it credit for, I think. As someone who is neurodivergent, as someone who has been a creative director, an art director, a publisher for many years, you know, all of these things. And yeah, like anything else, getting good output from an AI program, whether it be text or images, that's a skill too, right? And not a skill that compares to making an oil painting look fantastic or whatever, but it is a skill. And a lot of people are churning out work with bad AI art. You know, it is possible for there to be good AI art, and it is possible for there to be bad AI art. And if it's a choice between AI art and no art, I think I'd go with the AI part. There is a lot of good stock art out there. You just have to take the time to look for it. Time-wise, it's actually pretty comparable to AI art in terms of the time it takes to find appropriate pieces. It won't be as individuated as the AI art will be. Some people produce stuff with very good art in this way, others not. But everyone's finding their way, I think. I think people who've nailed their colours to the mast are probably making some sort of mistake, and I realise that is a deeply unpopular point of view, and as an artist and as a writer, you know, as someone who makes games, everyone seems to want me to take their side, but I don't know. I do know it has uses that are legitimate and ethical. I find many of the objections to be groundless or not to make internal sense, but I do worry about the futures of artists and writers and everything else as well, and I worry about the unethical scraping practices of a lot of these AI companies. but we're all going to have to navigate it. And I'm just one of many people trying to find my way. But because I'm neither in one camp nor the other, everybody hates me. So, anyway, if you made it all the way to the end of a comments video, then you are clearly part of my hardcore fan base. So I'm just going to quietly point out that my Patreon is just a few dollars short of hitting that 200 threshold, where I start producing content that's Patreon exclusive. So if anyone happens to have a spare buck or two a month, head on over to patreon.com/Grimachu. I think you'll find the link below, and sub. You'll get reminders when my videos come out, and if we can get over that $200 a month threshold, then there will be stuff. So yeah, take it easy, everyone. Zang.
About 3,000 of you subscribe, but only about 200 are getting notifications, so click the bell and click all.
Down before your eyes, the actor screaming agonizing cries, another useless reason to despise the secret life that everyone's nice, that secret life that everyone's nice, that secret life that everyone's nice. You're a star now, you go far now, in the Nero Daughter Show. In the Nero Daughter Show, you're on stage now. Disengage now. In the Nero Daughter Show. In the Nero Daughter Show. Nero Daughter Show.